Good morning. My name is Angela Brooks Osborne. I'm here with the OTB Spotlight TV show. I'm here with Trez Robinson from Virginia. She has been staging since 2006 in the Hampton Roads area, and we're going to tap into her expertise on investment properties. I met Trez, probably a couple months now. It's been a couple months. And I hit it off right away. She's amazing. Her business skills, the way that she runs her business has been absolutely phenomenal, and I could see it right away. When she reached out to me, it was to work on attracting more clients. That was the reason, attracting more clients. And I knew that she'd be perfect for the show because she has so much information that could really help a lot of my viewers, home stagers, investors, decorators. And I really think that she's going to be able to share so much with you today. So how did you get started? What was the, like, you didn't just wake up one day and say, okay, I'm going to work with an investor. Well, what was your first start?
Well, it was kind of an interesting story. Like I said, about 2008, an investor actually approached me and had a vacant property that he had flipped and asked me if I would stage it. Well, we had been staging vacant properties on and off since 2006, but we'd just been 2 years into the business, so we hadn't done a lot of work. So we were kind of taking baby steps and working up into, gradually getting to having more inventory and things like that. So at the time, I was renting furniture. And back then in 2006, 2008, most of the rental furniture companies were locking you into about a 3-month contract. So this investor particularly did not want a 3-month contract. He knew the house was going to sell quickly. It was in a great location, great neighborhood. He'd done a great job on it. The market was really strong, and he only wanted to rent the furniture for a month. So he asked me, could I do that? And I thought, well, in my brain, I thought, I have no idea. But I said, absolutely, we can do that. So what happened from there is that really was my leap of faith and jumping in the middle of the pond in now making the investment and buying my own inventory and starting to work with investors. So I could be flexible with them and have different terms and different rental contract terms with them.
What do you think was so you think it was the furniture that was what made them choose you over around just going and doing it themselves? Because, that was part of it. How did you find more like him? Like, sometimes you fall into a pool of target market or demographics of a certain type of client, but how did you repeat that? What was it that you did that you could keep repeating that over and over?
Well, I think a lot of it in the beginning when I was starting, I guess it was very fortunate for us that we were really one of the only staging companies in the area. So I hate to say we're the only one to go to, but definitely we were one of the few that were starting to do vacant properties. So I think it was really enticing to a lot of the realtors and investors and people, even homeowners putting their house on the market to, use our company because we were doing it when no one else was doing it. So we were really one of the first staging companies in this Hampton Roads area, and definitely the first to really take on having inventory and staging vacant properties, a full-blown vacant versus just going in and maybe redesigning or rearranging what people had. So I think it was that, and then it was word of mouth, and that kind of just built from there and kind of snowballed from that point forward.
So how many stages do you do a year now? So what's your common average of I shouldn't say stage properties, but investment properties do you do now?
We'll totally stage approximately in the company about 300 a year, and out of that 300, about 100 are properties that are working with just strictly investors.
Great, that's fantastic. That's a huge number. That is completely a niche market. We talk about niche markets a lot in marketing, and sometimes people they don't realize what that means. So I want to just explain that a niche market is when you actually find a typical grouping, or a grouping that is kind of like, for example, I'm a niche market. I niche market, and I work with home stagers and decorators as marketing coach, right? So 90% of my business, yes, I could work, and I do have the skill sets to work with a wide variety of small businesses, but I niche market, and I specifically choose to put processes in place and things and solve problems for a specific type of client. And that's what basically you have done. You have put together processes that investors want. You listen to, you even said, you listened to your investor even from the beginning when they said that they couldn't do the 3 months. So you put terms and you put things in that, and whereas we're the solution provider for investors that was nothing else was like that out there. So you became a niche marketing stager and working with investors. So tell me that process, like, would you mind sharing a little bit of your magic secret sauce and what is the process that you work with an investor? If there was an investor sitting on the line right now and just listening, what makes you different than any other stager out there? What's your process?
Well, first I'd like to explain a little bit about the difference that I find working with the investors versus a homeowner that's putting their house on the market, because there is a big difference in why we choose to work with the investors primarily as a niche market. A home seller that's putting their house on the market obviously lives in their home. It's their home, they've created that. And a lot of times I find that what they've created and how they've set that up, they're obviously very comfortable with that, and that's what they like. So sometimes you're dealing with kind of just what they have at the time, the colors they painted the house, the way the house is maybe set up, maybe some remodels they've done that were more specific to their liking and their tasting and their family style. Where when the difference is when we're working with investors, as I guess HGTV, so famously calls flippers, that's basically what they are, rehabbing, is we're really getting that property. They're choosing a property that might have challenges that they want to overcome, that they can change and overcome those challenges to make it a better suitable property. For example, it might be, let's say, maybe 2 rooms that are very small, because a lot of the homes the investors are purchasing, a lot of times they're older homes possibly, and they're trying to upgrade and remodel those, and maybe the home was built in an era where rooms were small and more closed off and we didn't have that open space concept. So they're acquiring these properties and they're looking for an opportunity to make a better space, to make a better home for family. So I find that really interesting because it gives us an opportunity, stagers, to have a better outcome when we're staging, of course, because we're dealing with rooms that are specifically designed that already have that open space, or the rooms are larger, so we can really present the staging in a much better fashion. Or let's say maybe there's a wall to take down or something like that. Another example might be maybe the house was a full bath and a half bath. So it was, what we call like 3, 2.5 versus a 3-bedroom with a full 2 bathrooms, which we know is much more marketable. So investors generally will never get a house and market a house as a 3, 1.5. They'll always take that property and they'll turn it into a 3 and 2. So they'll take that half bath and maybe it's located where they can turn that into a master suite, turn that into a full bath, add a shower and a tub, maybe expand the vanity area or whatever, and put some nice tile and granite in there and really make it a very desirable master bath. That might not be huge, but at least it's a nice full master bath. And now the house is marketed, as a full 3-bedroom, 2-bath house. Another thing they do a lot of is converting, let's say, a garage to another living space. So it might be a house that has 1 living space, and now they've converted that for a family. Now there's options for that family. They have 2 living spaces, and it really makes it nice. It makes it nice for staging. You can separate the rooms. You can set one room up for, let's say, more of a TV room for the hangout for the kids, and the other room could be more of a formal or just another separate sitting area or living space that gives the buyers a visual option. They can see they can really have 2 different sets of living spaces.
So I see that you're working, it's heavily with, looking at the demographics, who's most likely to buy. And that's really what staging has always been about. And a lot of times the message gets muddled sometimes, people think that home staging is decorating. When you're working with an investor, there's no muddled message. It is completely what is most sellable. And the investor is not like a homeowner who might have the challenge of separating that this is no longer where they want to live. This is no longer their home. This is a property for sale. With the investor, you don't have to worry about that. They're already, they know that their mindset is already, how can I make the most money by selling this house? And that's, as homeowners selling their properties, if you're listening to this, you need to basically turn on your investor brain. That's what we need to do. So that's I think that if I was a home stager, I would start using that analogy. I would start saying, you are no longer the property owner. You're no longer the homeowner here. You need to be an investor at this point. You've invested all this money into your home. We need to pretend you're an investor or a flipper and make sure that you're going to get the best return. Do you know that people do this for a living, and they just turn properties, a couple, 3 or 4 a year, even 2 a year, and that's what they live on? You, Mrs. Homeowner, if you were to turn on your investor brain right now and turn on your investor mindset right now, you have a potential of making one person's income, or at least a half an income this year, if we do this right. I think that's a great message that,
Absolutely.
even if you're not working with investors as a home stager, you could say that to your homeowner so that they can start thinking about turning their mindset on as an investor. And this is why. I think it's brilliant. Brilliant. So going back to the differences, what about the differences of working like in your company? Like, when you're targeting, I guess target marketing, or you want to work with more investors, what is it that you have to do differently? So tell us a little bit of the process, what you have to do differently to work with investors.
Well, I think what we target then in working with investors is we go back to, what is our target market? Well, our target market is realtors, but it's realtors specifically that work and list properties with investors. So
you still work with the realtors. You're still they're still the gatekeepers. Awesome.
Absolutely. Because, that they have that clientele, they have the connections. They maybe have been working with these investors, or investors have come to them and said, hey, I want you to list my properties, and I'm going to do 25 properties this year or whatever. And they take on that one agent. Well, if we target that particular realtor because we know they work with investors, that's 25 properties, that we don't have to go after. That's one person that we work with, and we have one direct line of communication. And that's the other thing that I think that why we really enjoy working with investors. And I think vice versa, they like working with us because we really keep it very simple and streamlined. Investors are used to working with contractors, and we're a contractor. So that's how they look at us, and they treat us very independently. So I don't need to meet that homeowner at the house. I don't need to meet that investor at the house. They just know, Trez, here's the code. Go look at my property, send me the bid, let me know when you can do it. And that's how they work. And that's the mindset that we're in with them, because they know when that property is going to be finished, when their contractor is going to turn that property over to them. They want it staged the next day. They want the photos. They want it on the market. And they have that whole process down because every day is money to them. So holding that property any longer is those holding costs they don't want to pay. They really want to narrow that down to a very, very limited time. So they really want that process to be very streamlined, and they really love working with us because we make it very simple for them and very straightforward. And most of the time it's seamless. I never see my investors. Some I've never met. They just trust and know what we do, basically give us the keys to the kingdom, so to speak, and we do our thing, and we're out and photos, and it's listed and sold. So it's a very streamlined, efficient, and successful process.
So you think that's why they've embraced you, is because they can get it done faster. They know what you know what you're doing, and they can trust you. So once you've done the first property for them, the process, the key is, I guess, if you were a stager wanting to do this, and I know I'm going to come back to this question a little bit, but you would need to make sure that your process is seamless and is repeatable, right? Wouldn't that be? I think that's what the message I'm getting from you. From masterminding with you on your newest marketing project, I know that your staging process is different, and so I've been wanting you to tell us a little bit about what that is. And I know the one controversy that we get all the time, and this is why I think I'm bringing it up, is you get paid differently. It's different than a staging project where you're kind of taking a risk with the investors, aren't you? Like when you set it up.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So tell me, what made you decide to do that? That's a huge risk. So just so you know, Trez gets paid at the end, at closing. And we talk about this a lot in our networks and in our groups, that, don't do that. It's one of our things that we say, there's a huge risk, but tell us a little bit why you started doing that, Trez. What made you decide, I'm going to give this a go or give this a try, and tell us the results has been over the last couple of years.
Well, that's interesting because I remember when I went through staging training, that was one of the things they hit on all the time. Don't get paid at closing. You deserve to be paid when you do the work. You deserve to be paid. And I agree with that wholeheartedly. However, I think there's exceptions to everything. And in our case, I just feel like I do what's right for my company. I do what's right for the people that work for me and our clients. And I try to be as flexible and as easy to work with and as efficient as possible when we're working with our clients. And so for investors, well, just as a side note, I mean, I've flipped properties. I've been flipping properties for the last 6 years. And so I've done quite a few of my own properties. So I really understand the process and I understand the, their cash flow and how things work and timelines and working with their contractors and getting these properties flipped. Because obviously the investors are not doing the work. They're hiring independent contractors to do all their work, to include the staging. So they're on that timeline. And obviously they're on a budget. And it's easy to say that. I know everybody's on a budget because we hear it all the time. Everybody's on a budget. But these guys really do have a very specific budget based on what they purchased the property for, how much the renovation costs are going to be. So everything's pretty much lined out. And I know when I do my budget for my flip properties, it's line item by line item, almost down to the penny, exactly what I'm going to spend, estimating. And after you do it a while, they have obviously a very much more accurate idea of how much it's going to cost them for these different, to do these different renovations. So knowing that, I felt that it made sense to work with them and to understand, how their money flow worked and what would be the easiest way to get them on board with staging. And that was really the initial of, because they're very money conscious, like a builder. So to get them to stage initially was difficult. It was hard to get them to make that investment in staging. So once I said, well, how about at the close of at the sale, of your property, the proceeds that you get from that sale, and oh, by the way, because you staged it, it's going to sell faster and you're probably going to get top dollar for that with possible multiple offers. The staging can be paid for then, which then really makes the staging pay for itself. Because if we ran the numbers and you held that property for, let's say, another 2 or 3 months without staging as it sat vacant, those dollars that are going to add up for your carrying costs, for your insurance, most of them don't have a mortgage, but at least insurance, electrical, and all the other things, that go into those carrying costs are definitely the staging cost or investment is going to outweigh those carrying costs. So it's really a no-brainer because that staging is going to pay for itself. It's on the tail end. They don't feel it necessarily because it's not coming out of their cash up front like they have to pay their other contractors. So it's just a win-win for everybody. And it's a contract. So really, it's when the invoice gets to the title company, I mean, it's contractual. We're on the HUD. I have a contract and we get a check cut to us from either the title company or, the legal office, wherever they're closing their property. So it does make it very contractual. And it's even I feel a lot of times, even a more secure way to get paid. I mean, sometimes there's glitches and everything, but it's really worked for us very well. And the investors that stage with us, I really believe, of course, I believe that they stage with us because of the quality and what they're getting, but because we offered that initially and because we offer that over and over again just to them, they always pick us.
They're loyal to you. They're loyal to you because you've basically invested in them at the same time that they've invested in you. So I think it's built some really strong relationships, right?
Absolutely.
Well, obviously, if you're getting like 100 investment properties a year, now out of that 100, how many have fall into that, oh my God, they didn't pay me category? How many times has that ever happened to you? That maybe they didn't pay?
It happens on occasion. Most of the time, it's not like never get paid. Sometimes it takes longer. We've had a couple that had some issues and they were, it's a learning curve because sometimes I've worked with investors that they're my first time working with them, and they're not as savvy or they're not as good business people. So they get a property and, I've had one that went to foreclosure. So, it happens on occasion, but I think it happens to everybody no matter how much you get paid. I get paid obviously upfront from other clients on the day of staging. And sometimes, we're chasing that money for a long time just because it's always a challenge sometimes for small business getting paid. And when you're paying someone a long distance away, when you don't have that face to face. So I think there's always challenges with that, but it's a very, very small percentage.
Yeah.
It's a risk that I'm willing to take in the company that I can absorb that if it does happen. But again, most of the time, I have a couple right now, but they're in the process of paying me. And sometimes if something happens to them, like this foreclosure or something, unfortunate happens with them, then I'll break it down for them and say, okay, let's break this down to 6 payments over the next 6 months. And if you just pay me, a small amount in 6 months, I just try to work with them to get that. And that usually will work if they're in some kind of financial difficulty or they've gotten themselves into some kind of financial difficulty. So it happens, but it doesn't happen enough not to to do that type of payment option, because it's definitely worth it reaps its benefits.
I think if you're a small company just starting out, having one of those right at the beginning would probably break you. But if you were a company that was, a little more established, had a few normal, I call them normal, but regular, homeowner to realtor kind of contractions for staging services, then this might be a risk that, you have a few dollars in the bank account that if somebody was not to pay the next staging, it's not going to break you, then this might be a risk that you're willing to take kind of thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I think like a branch that you can start out and try. You have, I tell my clients when they do this, it is really like you're a financial investor. That's kind of what you are. You're lending them, instead of money, you're lending them your services and your furniture and your what you bring to the table, basically. It's do you charge extra for that? Like, so let's say, for example, you have an investor who pays right away, and can pay up front, can pay right away. Do they get a better deal than someone who waits until closing? Like, do you actually make money on the money that's being invested?
No, no, I don't charge any differently. I don't really have any investors I can think of in the last 5 or so years that pay me up front. So it's just a service that I don't, and I think they know that. So I'm not charging any kind of inconvenience fee, or it's really, like you said, I think it's about having an established business where you have to have that comfort level. Obviously, it's a cash flow issue. So, a property, it might not close for maybe, it might sell in 2 weeks. It might go under contract in 2 weeks. But as we know, the whole closing process, it's not going to probably close for, at least in this area, for about 60 days. So you just have to know that's great. That property just sold and right after you staged it, but you're still not going to get paid on it for 60 days.
Right.
So it's like, like a realtor works, obviously. I mean, so I understand that it's a cash flow, and you just have to be at the point in your business. Yes, it's not for a brand new stager. It's not for someone that, maybe just is operating day to day, or doesn't have that cash flow or have that flexibility to do that. So it's really an individual thing. And I know there's a lot of naysayers, and I know there's a lot of stagers that tell me not to do it, or I should charge more, but it's just not what we do. And I feel like we've been really successful in how we've done it, and it's really worth it.
I believe that there's many, many different business models that work. And I call it staging shaming. Staging shaming, one stager shaming another for doing a business practice a certain way. And I truly don't believe in it. I believe that staging shaming doesn't have a place in our industry. And I think that we need to be careful that we do that. Just because it works for one person doesn't mean it might not work for another, but we are working together. And you sharing this information and knowing that the majority of our network is against getting paid at the end of closing is very brave of you, and very I think very giving and open, and I really do appreciate you taking the time, because I believe it has been successful for you, your business model that you've done, your cash flow was there. Well, another stager starting up might have the cash flow. Another stager might be maybe struggling to get clients, but they have a cash flow, and maybe this might be an answer to their new business model that they are going to put together. And so I really do thank you for sharing this with us. If you are an investor watching the show today and you've never worked with a stager, how do you recommend that they get started, an investor?
Well, I'd say probably the best way is to go online and look at different staging companies in the area. I would look specifically for stagers, and hopefully their website or something in their terminology or something that's in their website would indicate that they specialize in vacant property to start with, because I think it's really important that a stager is already established and can do vacant property. And what I mean by that is they either have the inventory, they have the resources, they have those things in place to be able to react to an investor's timeline, because that sometimes is tricky also, because the well-known contractors don't always finish when they're supposed to finish. So oftentimes, I'm getting ready to stage a job on Friday for an investor, and they'll call me on Thursday and say, oh, the cleaning people didn't come, or they didn't finish putting in the windows yet. Or so we have to then, flex their schedule and reschedule that job for the next week, which means, it could be a lost opportunity for another job at that point. Usually we can put something else in because we tend to stay very busy, but it could be a problem for someone that maybe doesn't have their own inventory or doesn't have the transportation to move it, because then you're talking about canceling or changing, rental furniture contracts or trucks that you've rented, or different logistical issues it could cause. So I would definitely say that I would look for a stager that is skilled in doing vacant property and has the flexibility. And even if they do rent furniture, that's fine. It's not that, but at least they have the volume that they can do those types of properties, and they really understand vacant property. They know how to look at that space and really set that up for the investors, because again, a lot of times with these houses, they're flipping, even though they've done a good job, there's still sometimes awkward or quirky spaces because the house was built in 1950 and rooms were just different then, and bedrooms are really small, and bathrooms really small. So it's important from a stager's perspective that you as a professional stager can make sure that you demonstrate and you put in the right types of furniture, kinds of furniture, the space, so it looks as efficient as possible, and the space shows as well, and it has a great online presence after your photos.
Oh, that's amazing. Thank you so much. So as an investor looking for a stager, looking for someone who can be flexible. Now, when you said that, I had a little bit of red flag going, as much as stagers should be flexible, an investor really needs to try to make sure they keep their stuff on time, because some stagers will charge a little bit of an inconvenience fee, right? And I think that that's a good business practice to have, so that people do try to stay on target as much. But you're right, if they don't, it would be harder if the stager was relying on furniture from somewhere else, and you as an investor would get nigged with a bigger fee than if they had their own. But they should expect, if you're not on time as an investor, you should expect to have a little bit of an inconvenience fee, which this is their living, and they have might have staff scheduled, etc. But if they have their furniture available, then they might not be as huge a fee to reschedule, which sounds sound. As you know, most of the OTB Spotlight TV and my network are on Facebook is Home Stagers and Decorators. So if I was a home stager or a home stager looking to add investing to the property, what would be, and so I guess we can think of it like if you had to do it all over again, and in today's, because 2006, that's 11 years ago, or I guess 2008 when you started, like 9 years ago, was a lot different than it is right now. If you were to be starting working with investors right this moment, what advice would you give to yourself or give to a home stager looking to work with investors right now? What would be the biggest advice that you could give them?
I would say look at targeting them specifically. I know, years ago, like everything, there weren't as many different types of helping groups. Now I'm a part of a couple investor groups. So having invested myself, and then I'm kind of their go-to stager when there's time to do a presentation, let's say, they'll always call me to come in and do their presentation on staging. And I really get to pitch, at no cost for me. It's basically free marketing for our company, going to pitch staging and give them great examples and photos and that type of stuff and doing a presentation. So there's a lot of good investor groups out there. It's a really good networking. I think networking is always really important. And then of course, going back to, looking at those realtors that work specifically with investors, or a high volume of their listings are with investors, because they've got those investors with multiple properties, and selling them and getting them on board, that realtor, with staging, then they're in turn going to help sell that to their investors as well, because they're going to be able to sell their listings a lot quicker. They're going to look greater. They're going to sell for top dollar, and all the benefits that come from that.
I am so happy that you came and joined me today. I really do think out of all the stagers and the networks I have, you shine when it comes to investment properties. And I have asked you to be part of a special book that we're putting out. You saw my vision this year. We were putting out 2 coffee table series books. One of them is about home staging. One is about decorating. And you saw the vision right away that we're going to co-author these coffee table books, and we're going to put great information inside each and every chapter. And the person who wrote the chapter on each section will be featuring and almost like their niche market. And so Trez is going to be writing the chapter about investments and investment properties. She's going to show some of the beautiful investments that she has done and throughout the book, and also give some great advice and information through in our coffee table book. So it's called Home Staging Inspiration Plus, and the theme this year is around the world. So we have stagers from Australia, the UK, Holland, obviously America and Canada. And we are going to really showcase the different features and elevate our industry by showing that there's more to staging than just decluttering and cleaning and painting, that there is actually some very art and science to having very successful property sales and using home staging as a marketing tool. So I wanted to let you know, if you want more information about Trez Robinson or her Stage to Sell services, please visit www.stagetosellvirginia.com.